Welcome to another old school basketball video game retrospective. I'm Andrew of the NLSC, and today we're looking at NBA All-Star Challenge for the Super Nintendo. Now, this is a game I've mentioned a couple of times on our podcast and also in the Friday 5, and it's one that's kind of been forgotten over the years. You'll probably understand why by the end of this video, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. NBA All-Star Challenge, developed by Beam Software and published by LJN, if you're a fan of the Angry Video Game Nerd, you'll be familiar with that name, is essentially a collection of mini-games. Gamers select one of 27 NBA players, one from each team at the time, and compete in one-on-one action, either in solo games or tournament mode. There's also a 3-point contest, free throw shootout, and horse. All modes are both 1 and 2 player. For a game released in 1992, its graphics are obviously dated, but quite good for the time. Its gameplay, however, well, not only has it not aged well, but even at the time it was kinda clunky. This is chiefly due to the shooting mechanics. Contrary to pretty much every other basketball game ever released, NBA All-Star Challenge requires you to press the shoot button once to jump, and then press it again to release the shot. It feels awkward, and for my money, the timing seems different each time you shoot, so it's hard to perfect the timing. There's a dunk button, but it's pretty much the same story. Press once to jump, press again to finish the attempt, and the dunks themselves look pretty awkward. To be honest, I can rarely make them. Defense and rebounding are virtually impossible, so the best strategy for success is to simply never miss a shot. The CPU tends to grab its own offensive rebounds, which is made even easier since you can both collect your own air balls. Other violations, such as fouls and goaltending, are actually called, but all in all, it's a very underwhelming representation of one-on-one basketball, or indeed basketball in general. NBA All-Star Challenge is notable for including Michael Jordan as the Chicago Bulls representative, so there is that. Other big names of the era such as Charles Barkley, David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, and Hakeem Olajuwon are also included, along with rising stars such as Shawn Kemp. There are some strange inclusions though, such as J.R. Reid for the Charlotte Hornets, and Tony Campbell for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Granted, not every team had an actual All-Star to represent them, and for some of the basement teams, their best players weren't necessarily among the league's elite. It's possible that likeness rights were an issue here, but still, it's a shame that a team like the Hornets doesn't have a Muggsy Bogues or 1992 Rookie of the Year Larry Grandmama Johnson to represent them in the game. In the one-on-one tournament mode, each user selects 4 players, or if you're playing the game alone, you'll pick 4 players for yourself and 4 for the CPU. That way, if all your players are eliminated, you can still play the final game in the tournament. Considering how easy it is to lose with the clunky gameplay and whatnot, even on the easiest difficulty, this is pretty much vital as an anti-frustration feature and a means of extending the gameplay. While the players' stats from the 1992 season are displayed on the player selection screen, there really doesn't seem to be any differentiation in how they play. You'll find that you can knock down threes with guys who rarely hit them in real life, and Tony Campbell can easily match up with the likes of MJ and Clyde Drexler. This is even more apparent in the 3-point contest, where the CPU will set record scores with terrible long-range shooters, while you struggle to top 15 points with the best 3-point marksman, thanks to those awkward shooting controls. Other than that, the basic concept of the 3-point shootout is represented fairly well. In the free throw contest, you select the number of attempts you want to take, and try to knock down as many as possible. To do so, you need to press the shoot button when the D-pad cursor is directly above the rim. In the words of the instruction manual, the cursor will be moving as if it has a mind of its own, so you need to use the D-pad to try and fight against it, to get into the right position. Once again, there's no noticeable differentiation between the players' abilities, and the results seem kind of random at times. Horse is probably the best mode in NBA All-Star Challenge, but once again, it's afflicted by the same lousy shooting mechanics as the rest of the game. Other than that, it's a decent, basic representation of Horse. Pick a spot on the floor, take a shot. If your opponent misses, they get a letter. If you miss, they pick a shot, and it's your turn to make it. It's Horse. When it's your turn to copy the shot, an X will appear on the floor, and walking over to it will snap your player into the right position. It's alright, though games can run a little long, and it's just a shame about those shooting controls. There are some different options for difficulty, winning conditions for the one-on-one games, and the number of free throw attempts in the shootout, but aside from that, there isn't a lot of replay value in NBA All-Star Challenge, at least as a single-player game. As a 2-player game, it probably fares a little better, but not by much. While it isn't a game that's aged well, NBA All-Star Challenge is an interesting release to look back upon. If you're a basketball fan in the 90s, this was a game you'd play in addition to something else, NBA Live, NBA Jam, and so on. It has some value as a multiplayer title, with games that are over relatively quickly and a few different modes to choose from, and in that respect, the concept does have merit, even if the execution wasn't great. To that extent, it's a relic of its era. Say what you will about some of the poorly received basketball games in the past decade or so, but they've all had something more to offer than NBA All-Star Challenge. Even with more polish, a game like this couldn't be sold for full price, not these days. Done well, it's the kind of game that could be possibly sold for $10 to $20 as a digital-only release, maybe on Steam, the PlayStation Network, and Xbox Live. Throw in better gameplay and a dunk contest, and you've arguably got a decent game for when you want to take a break from NBA Live or NBA 2K. As it stands, this definitely isn't a game you want to pay full price for, and even in the 90s, you'd probably feel a little cheated if you did. Still, it's somewhat of a unique game to look back on. If you do check it out, it's a game you might have fun with for half an hour or so, if you can master the controls. If you're after a quality retro basketball gaming experience though, this is one you could leave on the bench.